All right, next stage of the build. Time to start doing wiring. So we have to get all this tucked up in this dash. Let's get after that. All right, the first thing I got to do here is, you can see I've got this. This is underneath the heater in front of the dash. There's this lower aluminum panel, and then there's the back panel. Taking that out, obviously you can see that's the transmission tunnel. So if you look back in there, you can see the wiring harness on the back of the engine. I'm basically going to have this bulkhead fitting come straight up and hook into the bottom of the aluminum panel. So that means I've got to drill the bulkhead fitting holes in this aluminum panel. So let's do that. Okay, panel's out. I'm going to draw out, I've got to do it's a 1 3/4 square mounting pad, and the hole needs to be almost 1.5 inches, 1.4 inches, something like that. So I'll drill the hole, then we'll mark it, drill the holes for the mounting, and then get this squared away. Okie dokie. So there you can see I did the square, X marks the spot. Drill dead center there. There we go. I'll clean up this hole, test fit it, make sure it's gonna work. All right, mark the mounting holes. Now I'm gonna punch them and drill them. All right. Do one more, then I can mount this, mount my wiring harness, and then I can start mounting how it goes behind my dash. So you can see the wiring harness on the engine right there. So what I'm gonna do is, I wanna make sure this wiring harness is secure, because obviously they're wires, and any movement and stuff as they bounce around, if they're not secured, eventually they're just gonna end up start breaking wires within the harness, and I don't want that. So to secure it, I'm gonna be using these little dealios. Now you just mount these little brackets, and then you can run a zip tie through it, and then I can zip tie my wiring harness. I'm gonna zip tie it right there to the bell housing bolts. So let's hook that up. All right, the harness is sort of tucked up out of the way. I know it looks like sort of a wiring mess up in there, but there's a zip tie there. Another one there. You can see I've got 4 along the bell housing there that keeps the wiring harness sort of secure. So now I can put the plates back on and then start wiring the inside harness around the dash. So I need to shift gears a little bit. I'm gonna have to start doing a little bit of the carpets, because I basically wanna keep moving forward and not have to take steps back and tear everything down so I can put the carpets in. So obviously there's the wheel wells, that's the passenger side wheel well. I've already put the carpets in on the driver's side wheel well, because that is the most difficult, because I got to get past those lower foot pedals there. And the reason I'm wanting to go ahead and put these carpets in is because they come in pieces. So like this driver's side is actually 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. The left side, the back, and the right side are all glued in. So all these pieces have to get glued in. So once the dash and all the wiring harness is in, that's going to be virtually impossible to get in there and do that. So I want to go ahead and get those carpets glued in before I get finalized and put the wiring harness in. That way I don't have to tear everything back apart to do it. So let's get to doing the passenger side. The glue I'll be using is this DAP Weldwood contact adhesive. This stuff you could pretty much glue planets together and they wouldn't come apart. It's pretty much industrial grade glue, upholstery glue. Basically I'm going to take some, this is the carpet piece for the front. You'll go ahead and coat this front with a layer of the glue, and then I'm actually going to put another layer that's on the surface that this is going to be attached to inside the wheel well, the fiberglass tub. So then I'll coat that. I'll give it about 10 minutes to sort of set, and then push these two together. And once they're pushed together, it'd be cheaper to get another car than it would to pull this glue back off. So let's go ahead and get started doing that. Okay, we've let it sit. Let's stick this to it. And here we go. There it is, all glued in. Now I just got to do the other two sides, and then we can finish up this wiring harness. All right, all the carpets, passenger side are in. The middle section, and the driver's side carpets. Looks pretty dang good. The more of these little finishing pieces I put on, the more it's starting to look like a car, and I'm getting pretty excited. So next I'm gonna go ahead and put the inner wiring harness that goes behind the dash in. You can see obviously I've already got the cutouts and everything for both sides of the harness. I'm going to loop them up over the heater core, and then there's some relays I'm going to mount where the glove box is going to be right here. I'm going to have some relays. They'll be accessible from the glove box. So if I ever have to change them out or change a fuse or something, it'll be all in the glove box. So let's move on to that. So now that we got the carpet all squared away, we're going to start working on doing the main harness. And this is the body harness that was already in the car, right? So this is for all your like headlights and all the original stuff like the tachometer, all the stuff like that, all the gauges and stuff that went to the dash. Now, my dash, before I put it in, 3 of the gauges were mechanical gauges, and I've swapped those out for electronic gauges. Now, those electronic gauges obviously require some additional wiring. So before I loop my engine harness in here and make it more difficult to put the wiring in, I'm gonna go ahead and put those body wiring in now. It's 3 additional wires. I changed out 3 gauges. The 3 gauges I changed out were the oil temp, engine temp, and the oil pressure. Now, like I said, those are mechanical gauges, and I'll show you the difference between what the mechanical gauge requires and what the electrical gauge requires when we start wiring up the dash. But just know it's going to require 3 additional wires to send to the senders on the engine for those 3 sensors. So what I'm going to do is, I already bought a termination kit that is going to use the same ends. So it's going to look sort of factory, like it came with the car. And then I'll run the 3 additional wires through here, and then I'll show you in the engine bay where I'm going to run them to the senders. And those senders are or on the front of the engine, and I'm just going to follow existing wiring that already goes up there. Once I get that ran and all this squared away, then I can loop my engine harness over and go ahead and install that. And then once the engine harness is looped over, then we can wire up the dash and put the dash in, and all of this will be squared away. So let's start doing that. All right, those wires are ran. As you can see, it's just going to plug in like the other ones into my dashboard. Comes out there, gets tucked underneath there, you can't even see it. And it's going to run over. I'll just terminate it to the cinders once I get all those mounted up. But that'll be easy. I can do that later. Right now, let's work on getting the dash finished wired up and the inner harness. Let's get all that mounted up, and then we can get this, most of the interior pretty much done. Let's keep going. Well, let's mount this harness. Okay, I've got it mounted to the bulkhead here, so that's good. It's all bolted down. Now I'm going to do some mounting to this steel cross brace underneath the dash. And I'm gonna use these little wiring harness tabs. And I'll just drill the hole, tape this tab to the harness, push it in, and then that's to secure it so it ain't gonna be moving around or messing around back there. So let's go ahead and mount that. Alrighty. That ain't going anywhere. That is good. All right, let me vacuum all this up and then we can drape this other side and do it how I want to do it. Let's do that. All right, the interior wiring is all done. So you can see I sort of 3D printed this little relay holder, and I mounted it right there because that's where the glove box is going to be. So if I ever have to change out a relay or a fuse, because the fuses are built into the top there, it'll be easy. I just open up the glove box and exchange it. There's a big bundle. That cable's all going to be shortened up once I finalize mounting the computer. But you can see how I ran it up to the bulkhead fittings. And then right there, so this is the main power feed. And then on the other side, you can see where that's the ground that goes through the grommets there. And then the windshield wiper logic board there. So everything's sort of tucked up in there as best as I could get it. So that's all squared away. So now we can move on to the dash. So here's the dash. It came already pre-populated with all the gauges and everything. So I didn't have to do any of that, cover it and everything, and all these warning lights and blinker lights and all that stuff was installed from ERA. The only thing I did add to it is this little light right here, which is the low fuel indicator for the surge tank. I just went on Amazon and got like a classic indicator light, and I think it turned out pretty good. So now I'll know if the fuel in my surge tank falls below a certain level. This will tell me, hey, there's a problem. Something's not working right on your fuel system. So that's cool. I did change out the oil temperature and the oil pressure and the water temperature gauges. Factory style, they are mechanical gauges. And with the oil pressure gauge, I didn't really want an oil line going into the engine compartment. And then with these other two temperature gauges, I'll show you what the gauge looks like, but I didn't want to use the mechanical gauges because they're big, bulky, and it's like a 3/4 inch cinder, which is not really a cinder. There's actually a copper tube that goes from the gauge all the way into wherever you screw in the end of it is. So I'll show you what that looks like as opposed to an electric gauge. And then obviously you got your speedo and your tack. Now on the back, you can see here, it's kind of a nightmare, but ERA supplied this harness. They're all labeled with numbers and they gave me a wiring schematic, so it was easy just to plug those things in. Now obviously I changed out the mechanical gauges for electrical gauges, and in doing so I did have to make like a jump harness for the ground and the power to the gauge. And then as you saw earlier, I ran the lines for the senders through the bulkhead on the car, and I've ran it here so it'll just plug right in. So hopefully this will be sort of just plug and play. So let's install this dash. All right, dash is installed. It looks super cool. Now all I gotta do is just hook all this up, tidy it up, and put my steering column in. Sweet. All right, we've reached the end of the road for probably about 90% of the wiring. The dash is in, all the wiring's tucked, my steering column's in, steering wheel's on, and all the stock connections are made. It's all squared away. But it did not go smoothly. So I ran into about 3 different major issues. One being, right when I plugged up the battery, all my back lights came on all my gauges. So basically the lights were on and wasn't gonna work. Took the dash out, went through the wiring schematic, checked all the wiring behind the dash about 400 times, checked all the wiring on the firewall, made sure that was all squared away. Found a couple connections that may have been the issue. Put the dash back in, did the exact same thing. I did that, no lie, probably about 10, 12 times, taking the dash out, checking the wiring, taking a multimeter, starting to check everything. Finally, took the multimeter and checked the light switch, thinking it was either the ignition switch or the light switch. Something was shorting out in there. So with the plunger all the way in on the light switch, I was still getting power to the backlights. So that looked like the issue, and I figured I probably had a short in this light switch. Turns out what it was this knob. These are original style knobs put on basically aftermarket switches. The knob was just a little too long and it wasn't allowing the plunger to go all the way in to turn it off. So they used some sort of industrial NASA style glue, I guess, on this knob, and I could not get it off. So I just had to take a Dremel and Dremel the back of it enough to where I could finally get the plunger to go all the way in and turn it off. So that solved that issue. We were squared away. Figured, okay, we're on the home stretch now. Put the dash back in. Everything, the lights were off, everything was squared away. Turned it into the on switch. Started to test all my accessories like my wipers. As soon as I hit the wipers, boom, blew a fuse. All right, so started testing thinking maybe the wiper switch is shorting out. maybe the motor's bad. I didn't know. So I pulled the motor out, hooked it up, turned the wiper on, put a new fuse in it, and everything was working fine. Turns out another mechanical issue. So the wiper, the actuator line, this flexible threaded line, goes through this 5/16 basically brake line that goes through, and it goes to each of the turnstiles there. Well, trying to get all that installed in the car, I guess I kinked one of those lines and the actuator rod was getting stuck inside that tube and popping a fuse. So I had to go buy some new 5/16 brake line, remade all that, put it back in, boom. Okay, so that was squared away. Again, almost done, that should be it. Let's install everything, we should be squared away. Hooked it all up, turned it on, tried my blinkers. The rear blinkers weren't working. Everything else worked, just I wouldn't get blinkers in the rear. I had to go through each one of the connectors for the stalk here on the back side of the dash, going through each connector. Turns out one of the pins that has double wiring to it wasn't seated all the way, and when I put the connector on, it was pushing it out of the connector. Wasn't making connection. Finally, fixed that, got that all squared away, got everything buttoned up, hit the blinkers. Bob's your uncle, everything was squared away. So finally, I was able to put everything finalized, it's all plugged in. Everything works as it should. Now, with the key in, obviously no lights on the dash. Now I get my parking lights on. Can't really see it all that well right now, but the back lights coming on. Now my main headlights come on. Everything's working as it should. My wiper motors, turn it to the on position. Wipers are working. We're in business. So that works. My heater, golden. It works. Defroster heater. So that's good. I haven't tried my lighter, but I'm assuming that's good too. My fan switch is good. Horn is good. My indicators, now this indicator is for the ignition, the little big red indicator. Because I'm electronic fuel injection, hey, look at that. Lighter works. I can start smoking again, that's perfect. So the red indicator is your ignition. I'm not running a distributor or an MSD box or any of that, it's all EFI. So that indicator's never gonna work. I could probably figure out some wiring to make it work, but for the most part, that's not gonna work. My left and right indicators, they do work. My high beam, low beam switch, that works. Everything's good. So I think the road from here on out should be fairly simple, just bolting stuff on. So last few things I got to do is the wiring for the fuel pump is already ran to the back. That's already ran through. I've tested it, making sure it's getting 12 volts, so that's all good. So all I got to do now is just literally terminate the end of that wiring, plug it into my fuel pumps. That should be good. I am running this fuel pump controller from MSD. It's a dual relay, dual fuse, all pre-made. So all I got to do is run the wire into these terminals here, run it to my fuel pump. So then I'll have fuses and relays to both my pumps, my lift pump and my main fuel pump. So all I got to do is just mount that, connect those main wirings, run a 10 gauge wire from this unit over to the battery in the back. Bob's your uncle should be good. Every time I turn on the switch, the fuel pump should come on and we should be golden. So that should, for the most part, clear up all the wiring. Obviously, I've got the main wiring harness for the computer for the EFI stuffed under here. The connectors are on their way, so once I finalize mounting where I'm gonna put that computer, which I think is gonna be, if I've got enough room right here below the dip in the dash, I may try to make a bracket over here or something. I don't know. I'll figure out where I want to put it, and then I'll finally cut this to length and terminate that, and that should be good to go. Other than that, we're pretty much squared away as far as wiring goes. The hard part's done. All the dash wiring, all the gauges are wired up. My amp meters are reading correctly. Whew, that was tough taking this in and out about 50 times. So that'll wrap up wiring. Next, I've got the brackets back from Sin-Cut Sin to mount the remote oil cooler and my breather tank, and start making my linkage for my throttle linkage. Once that's all put in there, I can finalize. I've already got the hose and the fittings and everything for the oil cooler. I'll mount the oil cooler and run all those lines, and then put the interior in, finalize the interior, which is just basically gluing the rest of this carpet in on the rest of the main panels, the transmission tunnel, and throwing the seats in. Other than that, I mean, we're there, right? So I'm hoping the next video, we'll be firing this thing up. See what it sounds like with those mini mufflers on there. Probably ain't gonna be quiet, let's put it that way. So thanks for watching this episode, and I'll see you next time.